Hey guys, trying out another compilation video. This time I'm showing you how I made my Arsenal cosplay from the Arrowverse TV show. Again, please let me know what you think of these down in the comment sections. I'm trying to gauge if these are something people like, and also because I work in marketing, I'm looking at the SEO value of these. So feedback is great. Hope you enjoy it. Let's go ahead and dive on in. To start, I made the template for the grip of the arrow. I did research actual size for bows, specifically to my height. So I would make sure you do that. You want to be able to divide those two strips and then have that grip. So I measured out the grip and created a template for that. Then I was out of 10mm foam actually when I set out to do this, and I had plenty of 6. So instead of doing two 10mm pieces for the grip, I did 3 6mm, and I cut those out and then glued them all together in a stack. Once I had that all glued together, I went ahead and started carving it up a little bit to get some of the curves going before I sanded it with the Dremel. I just used a small box cutter just so I wouldn't go overkill on it. Now I'm measuring out strips to make the 2 curved pieces of the bow. I only need to make 1 template and I just trace it twice, but I'm measuring that out so it also corresponds with the measurements for a bow that would be a real one, but to my height, because I'm really short. If you haven't seen me at a convention, I'm really short. So first thing I do with that template is I am tracing it and cutting out 2 pieces of 4mm EVA foam with it. Then I cut 2 pieces of Warbler with that same template. Now I was very precise with my measurements, so I wanted to make sure that the 2 curved pieces would attach onto the grip with about 1 inch of it on the grip, so I was measuring and marking that out before I glued it. This is, of course, after everything has been sanded. And since everything has been sanded, I'm also taking some quick seal adhesive to patch up any seams that were a little rough post-sanding. And then once that dried, I went ahead and glued on the 2 curved foam pieces to the grip with contact cement. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit messy, and don't ever feel bad if you have to take something apart and redo things. Let this be a lesson. So next I glued the Warbler to my EVA foam with contact cement, which is fine. That was not the issue. It was I was not ready to do that step yet. I needed to think of a way to really give some sort of structure and skeleton to the foam before I attached the Warbler to give it kind of a clean top piece. So that was my mistake. I then had to remove all of the Warbler because it wasn't very structured. It was flopping all over the place when you picked it up. So we removed all the Warbler after we glued it on, and I had a solution to give this a little bit more structure. So once all the Warbler was removed, I literally just took this aluminum wire from Home Depot and took 2 strands per half of the bow, and I punctured through the part of the curve that attaches to the grip. I punctured both strands through that and then cut a slit, 2 slits through the curve, and glued that piece of wire into that slit so it would go all the way to the top. And then after I had those 4 pieces of wire in total, I covered the foam pieces with the Warbler. I did reuse the same Warbler. There is no shame in that. Warbler is expensive. But let this be a lesson. You can make mistakes, you can take things apart, and you can put them back together. And don't limit yourself on mediums that you work with. I know a lot of my tutorials are very foam focused, but I very rarely stick to foam. I'm literally using aluminum wire from the hardware store here. So don't be afraid to explore other mediums to incorporate into your foam. But anywho, to hide the ugly wires, we are taking that Warbler and we are now finally gluing it back on with contact cement. So now that the bow is finally all put back together, I need to take my foam dowels, it's a round one, and I'm cutting 2 little segments to put onto the parts of the curved pieces of the bow that attach to the grip. I need 2 bolts for that. So I'm cutting those and gluing them on. So off camera, I did play a little bit more with the bow shape just to make sure the wires were all shaped accordingly, since now everything just bends the way I want it. And I also spray primed it with Plastidip, not because I like Plastidip, I can't stress this enough, I don't like Plastidip, I hate Plastidip, it's just I still had a can left and I wanted it out of my house, so we use Plastidip. And then I'm just using a roller brush to paint the grip red and the tips also red with acrylic paint. So now I'm using a sponge brush to paint the black acrylic paint on all the remaining parts of the bow curves. To get any of the fine details like those bolts or screws and any little crevices, I do use a brush, like a regular paint brush, to finish painting those up. But the paint job is ultimately really easy. It's 2 colors, it's not a lot of detailing, it's very big sections. Then all I had to do was seal it with a matte seal, and you can add elastic cord to string it. I did not, so it was con safe, but that's pretty much it. So to start it off, I'm using 6mm EVA foam to create my base for the quiver that'll actually hold the arrows. I am just kind of making like 2 round pieces, or cutting for 2 round pieces so I can stack them together, and then cutting those with my box cutter. I did freehand that part. Now I'm just using contact cement and my heat gun to first glue those 2 pieces into cylinders, and then glue them one on top of the other to create the quiver base. Now I'm not going to sand any of this to hide seams or anything, because it's all going to get wrapped up in pleather, since this is just going to be our base like I mentioned. And then I sliced it just to shorten it a little bit from what it was at, and also it has an angle at the top of the harness, so I wanted to make sure I cut at an angle so I would have that too. Now I'm going to trace and cut, again on 6mm EVA foam, a piece that the quiver will actually attach to make the harness that is used to wear the quiver on your back. Then I'm tracing that, the little piece for the harness, I'm tracing that onto the black pleather material, and I'm tracing it twice with a little bit of extra to wrap around and cover both sides with black pleather. And I am using hot glue to glue it all on for the most part. I do touch up the edges with super glue though later off camera. Now I'm taking some red pleather and measuring out to wrap around the top as trim for the quiver, and I'm cutting it, and I am hot gluing and also added some super glue to it to secure it in place. Now I'm taking a really small piece of 4mm EVA foam and just creating kind of a bottom piece. It doesn't have to look nice or perfect or anything. That's why I'm using scrap, so that way I can create that bottom to hold the arrows in. Now I'm also tracing some black pleather for the bottom and cutting that out, and then hot gluing it to the bottom and having some of the edges wrap around at the base. I don't have to worry about how that looks because it's going to get covered when I wrap the entire thing in pleather, which I do right after this. I wrap the entire thing, hot glue it on. I do use some super glue for the edges, and then I kind of cut it at the top and then finish up the gluing there. Now I'm measuring the center because I need to create a little middle decorative piece, which is going to be black pleather wrapped around with red trim to it on the top and the bottoms. So I'm measuring that out on the black pleather and the red pleather, and then I'm actually sewing the red pleather trim tops to the black piece, and then I'm going to go ahead and hot glue it on, but super gluing the edges off camera. Now I'm hot gluing the quiver onto the harness base. Don't do this. It didn't hold. I had to redo it with super glue. I really recommend super glue for the most part for a lot of this stuff. It gives you a little bit more durability, and it won't come apart as easily. Now I'm measuring out the black straps that will go onto the harness that I'm going to cut, and I am going to just fold them over and glue them instead of sewing, just to kind of save some time. I hot glue first the belt straps onto the harness base. I would recommend super gluing. I did also end up later on doing like 1 notch sewing with like my leather sewing stuff, the straps to the base later on. It's a little bit difficult because of that foam piece that's in that base, but it helps a little bit. But I would go the super glue route for getting those attached, and then I'm also attaching those buckles. I would also super glue those on as well to the straps to finish creating the harness. And then we're going to take the black pleather that we've been using to line a little bit of the top of the inside, not the whole thing, just so like when you peek in a little bit you can see that it's lined. I'm not going for the whole thing, that's just no. But then that's pretty much it. That's all you gotta do to make this. So to get started, I purchased this template off of Etsy. You'll notice on the paper it's a Robin, I think specifically Dick Grayson. I couldn't find a specific Arsenal mask, so this one did match though for the most part, so I'm just cutting out this template real quick before I get started. Now I'm just tracing that template as instructed onto 4mm EVA foam. That middle piece I'm tracing once, and the I-frame I'm tracing twice. I am supposed to angle the cut at the corners on the eyepiece where they'll line up with the middle nose piece, and I'm also supposed to angle the cuts around the nose piece so that way it all glues together very nicely. And I am cutting it out with just an X-Acto knife since it's 4mm EVA foam, and it gives me a little bit more precision with the different shapes. Now we're also making little slices in the eye frames all around, so that way we can shape it so it gets some more depth to it. So we're making those slices real fast, again with the X-Acto. And to be clear, these will be on the inside, so the part that is against your skin, not the outside of the mask that you're making these slits. And now I'm using contact cement to glue those eye frames to the nose piece, and I'm also using it to put glue in all of those slits with a heat gun to create the shape of the mask. So I'm doing all of that to put it together, and then I'm going to use my Dremel to sand all of those seams and the edges to make them clean. After sanding, I did also use some of that Quick Seal caulk adhesive to fix up just any of the seams that might have looked like they're coming apart, because that'll happen sometimes when you sand stuff. So just fixing up all those with that, and I use a little bit of water as well so that way it's not like super messy. And then I'm using the heat gun to give the final shaping so it fits my face perfectly. After that, I primed the whole mask with Plastidip, and then I started painting it with a red matte acrylic paint. So I'm just painting that whole thing. I did a couple of coats so it really does stand out, since it's a lot of red for Arsenal. And then I am adding elastic, so I measured that so it would fit to my face, and then I painted that red as well, just for the heck of it, with the same paint. And then to seal the mask, I'm just using a matte Mod Podge. I was sadly out of my Liquitex. I usually use Liquitex, so that's why we're using Mod Podge. It works just as well. I like spray on better. With spray on, you get less of the brushstroke risk. So we're sealing that with a matte finish. And then to finish it all off, I am super gluing the elastic to the mask. I really prefer super glue because it looks a lot cleaner than hot glue. There's less excess, so if you're competing, it won't show as much. And it gives you a really strong hold. Just be careful not to get it on your skin, but then you are done creating a superhero mask, aka my Arsenal mask. First step typically for me with sewing, because I don't like working without a pattern, is I'm going to create the glove pattern. Creating a glove pattern is probably one of the easiest sewing patterns to make, since you literally just trace your hand. Trace your hand on a piece of paper, and then you cut it out with scissors. Really simple, really straightforward. Now I'm just taking that hand pattern and I am tracing it onto the black pleather. I'm going to be using it for the sides of the gloves on the thumb and the pinky, and then all of the fingertips. So I'm kind of just tracing the parts that I need for... So I have to do it twice because I need like the top and the bottom of each glove, and then it ends up being a total of 4 times because 2 gloves. So I'm tracing that, and then I'm cutting it all out and laying it out so I know what's what and can keep track of everything. Yeah. Now you can see I have this black spandexy material that I'm tracing the main portion of the hand to, but with the fingertips and those side pieces cut off. And I'm tracing that also 4 times because top, bottom, 2 gloves. So I'm doing that, and then I'm cutting all of those pieces out. And then what I'm doing before we start sewing the gloves actually together, I'm sewing all of those pleather pieces to each individual piece, so the fingertips to the spandex. So I'm starting by pinning that all together, and then I am hand sewing it because I need to use thicker thread because of the pleather, and it just won't work in the sewing machine. So I'm sewing those pleather pieces to the black spandex first. Now that all those detailing pieces are together, I am pinning the gloves together so we can start sewing those together. The way you want to do it, though, is you want to do them so they're inside out. So that way all the seams are hidden inside the glove. So make sure you're sewing those inside out, pin them together inside out, and then again, we're hand sewing because pleather. But after you're done sewing, you'll go ahead and turn them to be, the right way, the correct, not inside out, and then you're done. You have cosplay gloves. Congratulations. Thanks so much for watching this cosplay crafting tutorial. Sorry if it was a bit of a mess. If you want to see what we made actually with the finished cosplay, make sure to check the links in my description and let me know what your crafting questions are in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see what I'm crafting up next. Bye-bye!